The rising sun painted the Wyoming sky in hues of gold and crimson as Catherine Foster scrubbed vigorously at the kitchen floor, her knuckles raw and bleeding from hours of work. The year was 1875, and at 20 years old, Catherine, or Kate, as most called her, had known little beyond the confines of her uncle's ranch since her parents' death 5 years prior. The Lazy R Ranch had once been a place of fond memories when her father was alive, but now it had become her prison. "Catherine!" The booming voice of her uncle, Randall Foster, echoed through the modest ranch house. "Get out here, girl!" Kate's heart hammered against her ribs as she dropped the brush into the bucket of soapy water. She wiped her hands on her apron and tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear before stepping onto the porch, where her uncle waited, face flushed with anger, a leather whip clutched in his meaty hand. "Yes, Uncle Randall?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "The milk's gone sour," he growled, waving the whip menacingly. "I told you to check the cellar yesterday. Can't you do anything right?" "I did check it," Kate said, backing away. "I swear I did. The milk was fresh then." "Are you calling me a liar?" Randall advanced on her, raising the whip high. "This is the last time you'll talk back to me, girl." Kate raised her arms instinctively to shield her face, bracing for the familiar sting of leather against skin. But the blow never came. Instead, a strong hand caught her uncle's wrist in midair. "Not again!" The voice was deep and steady, belonging to a tall stranger Kate hadn't noticed approaching. His face was partially shadowed by a worn Stetson, but she could see the determined set of his jaw beneath several days' worth of stubble. "This doesn't concern you, stranger," Randall snarled, trying to wrench his arm free. "This is family business." "Beating a woman is no man's business," the stranger replied, his grip unwavering. "I suggest you drop the whip before I make you drop it." For a moment, Kate thought her uncle might challenge the man, but something in the stranger's eyes made Randall reconsider. He dropped the whip with a scoff. "Who the hell are you, anyway?" Randall demanded. "Xavier Yates," the man answered, releasing Randall's arm but standing firmly between him and Kate. "Just passing through, but I won't ride by while a man raises a whip to a woman." Kate studied him properly now. He was tall, with broad shoulders that tapered to a lean waist. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a tan leather vest. His eyes, a striking shade of green, moved from her uncle to her, filled with quiet concern. "You all right, miss?" he asked. Before Kate could answer, Randall cut in. "She's fine. And like I said, this is family business. Now state your piece and move along." Xavier Yates didn't budge. "I'm looking for work, actually. Heard the Lazy R might be hiring hands for the season." Randall narrowed his eyes. "Who told you that?" "Fella named Johnson in town. Said you lost a couple of men to the silver rush in Colorado." Kate watched her uncle's internal struggle play out across his face. The Lazy R did need hands desperately. They'd lost 3 men last month, but Randall clearly didn't want this stranger around after what he'd just witnessed. "We ain't hiring," Randall finally said. "Yes, we are." The words left Kate's mouth before she could stop them. Both men turned to look at her, surprise evident on their faces. "Uncle Randall, we lost Williams and the Harmon brothers. The cattle drive to Cheyenne is in 3 weeks. We need the help." Randall's face darkened dangerously, but Yates spoke before he could respond. "I've worked cattle drives from Texas to Montana," he said. "I can break horses, mend fences, and I'm handy with a branding iron. I'll work for fair wages, and I keep to myself." Kate held her breath as her uncle weighed his options. She knew the upcoming drive was crucial. They needed the money to pay off the bank loan that had kept the Lazy R afloat after last year's drought. "Fine," Randall finally grunted. "Bunkhouse is out back. $30 a month, meals included. You'll start today. Fence on the north pasture needs fixing." "Much obliged," Yates said with a slight nod. Randall turned his glare on Kate. "And you get back to your chores. That floor won't scrub itself." As her uncle stomped off toward the barn, Kate released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She glanced at Yates, who was watching Randall's retreat with a stony expression. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but you shouldn't have interfered. He'll only be angrier later." Yates turned to her, his expression softening. "Has he done that before?" Kate lowered her eyes. "My uncle has a temper, especially since my aunt died." "That's no excuse," Yates said firmly. "No man has the right to treat a woman that way." Kate felt a flutter in her chest at his words, but quickly tamped it down. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I should get back inside before he notices." "Wait," Yates said, bending down to pick up the fallen whip. He examined it for a moment before meeting her gaze. "I meant what I said. Not again." With that promise hanging in the air between them, he tucked the whip into his belt and headed towards the bunkhouse, leaving Kate to wonder who exactly Xavier Yates was and why fate had brought him to the Lazy R. The next morning, Kate rose before dawn as usual to prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. The kitchen was her domain, the one place where Randall rarely interfered, and she took pride in feeding the men well. As she kneaded dough for biscuits, she heard the bunkhouse door open and close, followed by footsteps on the gravel path. Peeking through the window, she saw Yates heading toward the barn, his tall frame silhouetted against the lightening sky. There was something different about him compared to the other hands they'd hired over the years. Most were drifters looking for quick money before moving on, or local boys more interested in cards and whiskey than honest work. Yates moved with purpose, like a man who knew exactly who he was and what he was doing. By the time the breakfast bell rang an hour later, Kate had laid out a spread of biscuits, bacon, eggs, and coffee. The 4 remaining ranch hands filed in, followed by Yates and finally Randall, who sat at the head of the table without acknowledging Kate. "Xavier!" Randall barked after a few minutes of silent eating. "You'll ride out with Simmons today. Check the herd in the north pasture and finish that fence." "Yes, sir," Yates replied evenly, though Kate noticed his jaw tighten at her uncle's tone. "Rest of you know your jobs," Randall continued. "We've got 3 weeks to get these cattle ready for the drive, and I won't have any slacking." As the men finished breakfast and headed out, Kate began clearing the plates. She was surprised when Yates lingered, waiting until Randall had left before approaching her. "Can I help with anything?" he asked, gesturing to the stack of dirty dishes. Kate blinked in surprise. No man's ever offered to help with dishes before. A small smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "My ma would tan my hide if she knew I wasn't offering to help a lady with her work." "Your mother raised you well then," Kate said, returning his smile tentatively. "But I can manage. You'd better catch up with Simmons before my uncle notices you're missing." Yates nodded, but before leaving, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving of a horse. "Found this piece of cedar by the bunkhouse last night. Thought you might like it?" Kate accepted the carving, turning it over in her hands. The detail was remarkable for something made so quickly. The flowing mane, the powerful stance. "You made this last night?" "Helps me think," he said with a modest shrug. "Keep it somewhere your uncle won't find it." With that, he tipped his hat and strode out, leaving Kate holding the small token, the first gift she'd received in years. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm. Each morning, Kate would rise before dawn to prepare breakfast. And each day, Yates would find small ways to acknowledge her. A nod, a brief smile, or occasionally a few words exchanged when Randall wasn't watching. Twice more, he left small wooden carvings for her, a bird in flight and a wildflower, which she kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her room. Kate found herself looking forward to these small interactions, though she tried to temper her growing feelings. She knew better than to dream of escape or happiness. Her uncle had made it clear, after her parents' death, that she was his ward until she married, and he'd chased off the few local boys who'd shown interest in her over the years. The lazy R was as much her inheritance as it was his, and Randall Foster had no intention of sharing it with anyone. On a particularly hot afternoon, Kate was hanging laundry when she heard raised voices from the corral. Peering around the corner of the house, she saw Yates and her uncle in what appeared to be a heated discussion. Several of the other hands stood nearby, watching uneasily. "That horse isn't ready," Yates was saying, his voice firm but controlled. "He needs more time with the saddle before anyone tries to ride him." "I don't need some drifter telling me how to break horses on my own ranch," Randall snapped, grabbing a saddle from the fence. "I've been breaking mustangs since before you were weaned." "That may be, sir," Yates replied, "but that stallion has spirit. Push him too hard, and someone's liable to get hurt." Randall's face reddened. "You questioning my judgment, Xavier?" "No, sir. Just offering my professional opinion." Kate held her breath, waiting for the explosion she knew was coming. But instead, Randall let out a bark of laughter. "Professional opinion? Tell you what, you're so sure of yourself, you break him right now." Yates glanced at the Mustang, a magnificent black stallion with a white blaze down his face. The horse was pawing at the ground nervously, eyes rolling as he sensed the tension. "Fine," Yates said finally, "but I'll do it my way." For the next hour, Kate abandoned her chores to watch from a distance as Yates worked patiently with the horse. Instead of forcing the saddle on immediately, as Randall would have done, he spent time just talking to the animal, letting it get accustomed to his scent and voice. Gradually, he introduced the saddle blanket, then the saddle itself, all the while murmuring reassurances to the nervous stallion. By sunset, Yates was riding the Mustang in slow circles around the corral, the animal responding to gentle pressure from his knees and subtle shifts in weight. When he finally dismounted and handed the reins to a stunned Randall, a smattering of applause came from the other hands who had gathered to watch. "That's how you break a horse without breaking his spirit," Yates said quietly, though Kate was close enough to hear. Randall's expression was unreadable as he took the reins. For a moment, Kate thought he might acknowledge Yates's skill, but instead he merely grunted and led the horse away. That night, as Kate was bringing a basket of mending to her room, she was startled by Yates's voice from the shadows of the back porch. "You shouldn't have to work this hard," he said softly, "from dawn till dusk every day." Kate set down her basket, glancing nervously toward her uncle's closed door. "It's just the way things are," she whispered. Yates stepped closer, his face illuminated by the silver moonlight. "It doesn't have to be." Something in his voice made Kate's heart race. "What do you mean?" "I've been watching," he said. "The way he treats you, the way he runs this place. This ranch should be thriving, but he's running it into the ground. And you along with it." Kate leaned against the porch railing, suddenly feeling the weight of years of exhaustion. The lazy R was my father's dream. He and my uncle built it together. When my parents died in that stagecoach accident, there was nowhere else for me to go. And now, Kate hesitated, afraid to voice the thoughts she'd kept locked away. Now I'm trapped. The bank loan is in my uncle's name. Even though half this land should be mine by right, I can't claim it without his signature. And he'll never give that. Yates was quiet for a long moment. "What if you could leave, start fresh somewhere else?" Kate gave a bitter laugh. "With what money? Besides, he'd find me. My uncle doesn't let go of what he considers his." "I could help you," Yates said, his voice dropping even lower. "After the cattle drive, I'll have some money, enough to get you to Denver maybe. My sister lives there. She could help you find work." Hope flickered briefly in Kate's chest, before reality extinguished it. "Why would you do that for me? You hardly know me." In the moonlight, Yates's eyes were intense, searching her face. "I know enough. I know you deserve better than this." Before Kate could respond, the sound of a door opening inside the house made them both freeze. "I should go," she whispered urgently. "If he finds you here—" "Kate!" Yates caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Think about it, please." She nodded quickly before slipping inside, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years: possibility. The next day brought dark clouds and the promise of rain, a blessing for the drought-stricken land, but a complication for ranch work. Kate spent the morning baking extra bread and preparing stew for the evening meal, knowing the men would be cold and hungry after working in the weather. When the rain finally began to fall in earnest around noon, she wasn't surprised to see the hands returning to the bunkhouse early. What did surprise her was when Randall burst into the kitchen, soaking wet and agitated. "Where are the ledgers?" he demanded without preamble. Kate wiped her hands on her apron. "In your desk, where they always are." "They're not there." He prowled around the kitchen, opening drawers and slamming them shut. "Someone's been in my office." "I haven't touched them," Kate said, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. "Maybe Mr. Sullivan from the bank took them when he visited last week." Randall stopped his search to glare at her. "Sullivan wasn't in my office, and those ledgers don't leave this house." He took a menacing step toward her. "If I find out you've been snooping—" The kitchen door opened and Yates stepped in, rain dripping from his hat and coat. "Mr. Foster," he said, nodding to Randall, "found something you might want to see in the south pasture. Looks like someone cut a section of fence. Could be rustlers." Randall's attention immediately shifted. Cattle rustling was a hanging offense, but it was also a real threat to ranchers. "Show me," he growled, already heading for the door. As he passed Yates, Kate noticed an exchange of glances between them that she couldn't quite interpret. Before she could question it, both men were gone, heading back into the downpour. It was nearly nightfall when they returned, both mud-splattered and grim-faced. Kate served them hot coffee in silence, watching as Randall paced the kitchen. "No tracks because of the rain," he was saying, but that fence was definitely cut. We'll need to post guards with the herd until the drive. I'm happy to take first watch tonight, Yates offered. Already told the boys I would. Randall nodded approvingly. Good. I want 2 men on rotation all night. Can't afford to lose a single head before Cheyenne. As Kate moved to refill their cups, Yates caught her eye briefly, giving her a subtle nod that seemed to carry meaning. Confused, she returned to the stove, wondering what had transpired between the 2 men during their hours in the rain. Later that night, as the storm continued to batter the house, Kate was awakened by a soft tapping at her bedroom window. Heart racing, she crept to the glass and peered out to see Yates standing in the rain, gesturing urgently for her to open the window. Glancing nervously at her closed door, Kate unlatched the window and pushed it open just enough to speak. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "If my uncle catches you—" "He won't," Yates said, rain streaming down his face. "He's passed out drunk in his study. Listen, I don't have much time. I need to show you something. Now, in this storm. It's important, Kate. Please." There was an urgency in his voice that compelled her. "Wait by the back door," she said. "I'll meet you there." Minutes later, wrapped in her father's old oilskin coat, Kate slipped out the back door to where Yates waited. Without a word, he took her hand and led her through the rain toward the barn. Once inside, he closed the door and lit a small lantern, casting shadows across the hay-strewn floor. "What's going on?" Kate demanded, pushing wet hair from her face. "Why all this secrecy?" Instead of answering, Yates reached into his coat and pulled out a leather-bound book. Kate recognized it immediately as her uncle's ledger. "You took it!" she gasped. "Yates, he'll kill you if he finds out." "He won't," Yates said confidently. "I'll have it back in his office before he wakes tomorrow. But you need to see this." He opened the ledger to a marked page. "Look at these entries from last year." Kate peered at the familiar columns of numbers. Her uncle had always handled the ranch finances, but she'd helped with the books occasionally when he was too drunk to manage it. "What am I looking for?" she asked. "Compare the cattle sales from last year's drive to the bank deposits," Yates said, pointing to 2 different entries. Kate studied the numbers, her brow furrowing. "There's a discrepancy. The deposit is almost $1,000 less than the sale." "Exactly. And it's not just last year." Yates flipped through several more pages. "I went back 3 years. Each time, the amount deposited is significantly less than what the cattle should have brought." "Maybe he had expenses," Kate suggested, though doubt had already taken root. "Supplies, wages, all accounted for separately," Yates said, shaking his head. "No, Kate, your uncle's been skimming money from the ranch. Your ranch, for years. And there's more." He turned to the latest entries. "According to this, the Lazy R is mortgaged to the bank for twice what it should be. The loan payments are enormous." Kate felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. That can't be right. The ranch has been profitable, even through the drought. "It should be," Yates agreed grimly. "But your uncle's been gambling away the profits. These entries here," he pointed to a column of figures marked only with initials, "they match up with trips he takes to Cheyenne. I asked around town. Seems Randall Foster is well known at a certain gambling hall there." Kate sank onto a hay bale, her mind reeling. So the ranch is in trouble. "Worse than that," Yates said, sitting beside her. "According to these figures, without a miracle, the bank will foreclose after this year's drive. The money from the cattle won't be enough to cover the debt. And I'll have nothing. Kate whispered, the full implications hitting her. No home, no inheritance, nothing. Yates took her hand, his warm fingers closing around hers. Unless we do something about it. Kate looked up at him, searching his face in the lantern light. Why are you doing this, Yates? Why risk so much for me? For a moment, he was silent, his green eyes reflecting the small flame between them. When I rode onto this ranch and saw him raise that whip to you, he finally said, something inside me broke. I've seen too much cruelty in this world, Kate. Too many people using their strength to hurt rather than protect. He hesitated, then continued more softly. My sister, the one in Denver. She was in a situation similar to yours. Married a man who seemed decent enough at first but turned cruel behind closed doors. By the time I found out, she'd endured years of beatings. I helped her escape, start a new life. His jaw tightened. Swore I'd never stand by and watch another woman suffer if I could help it. Is that the only reason? Kate asked, her voice barely audible over the rain pounding on the barn roof. Duty? Honor? Yates's gaze softened as it held hers. No, he admitted. Not anymore. The air between them seemed to change, charged with something Kate hadn't dared to name until now. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Yates leaned closer. His lips, when they met hers, were gentle, questioning. Kate closed her eyes, allowing herself this one moment of sweetness amidst the chaos her life had become. When they parted, Yates rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out, Kate. I promise you that. For the first time in years, Kate allowed herself to hope. What do we do now? Yates straightened, his expression becoming resolute. First, I put this ledger back before your uncle notices it's missing. Then we need a plan. One that gets you clear of this place with what's rightfully yours. The cattle drive starts in 4 days, Kate said, thinking aloud. If the money from that won't save the ranch, then we need to focus on saving you, Yates finished. Your uncle may have mortgaged this land to oblivion, but that doesn't mean you have to go down with it. As they slipped back through the rain toward the house, a plan began to form in Kate's mind, dangerous and desperate, but perhaps her only chance at freedom. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations for the cattle drive. While the ranch hands worked from dawn till dusk, getting the herd ready, Kate and Yates exchanged information in brief, careful moments, away from Randall's watchful eye. On the evening before the drive was to begin, Kate managed to slip Yates a note during dinner, asking him to meet her in the barn at midnight. When the appointed hour arrived, Kate made her way through the darkness, her heart pounding with equal measures of fear and determination. Yates was already waiting, his face grave in the dim light of the single lantern. Are you sure about this? He asked as soon as she closed the barn door behind her. Once we start, there's no turning back. Kate nodded firmly. I'm sure. I found the documents in my uncle's desk. The original deed to the ranch showing my father's half ownership, and my parents' will leaving their share to me. He's kept them hidden all these years, but they're legal proof that half the Lazy R is mine. Good, Yates said. What about money? We'll need something to start over with. I found his secret stash, Kate replied, a hint of vindication in her voice. $3,000 in cash, hidden in a lockbox beneath the floorboards in his room. Most of it must be what he skimmed from the ranch profits over the years. Yates whistled softly. That's a small fortune. Enough to buy land elsewhere. Start fresh. It's my money, Kate said firmly. At least half of it is, rightfully. And after what he's put me through? She trailed off, memories of years of abuse flashing through her mind. I know, Yates said gently, taking her hand. You don't have to justify it to me. So tomorrow, when the drive begins, I'll gather what I need while he's gone, Kate finished. The documents, the money, a few personal items. Then I'll take one of the horses and meet you at the crossing near Elk Creek, as we planned. By sundown, Yates confirmed. I'll make some excuse to separate from the drive. With any luck, we'll have a day's head start before Randall realizes what's happened. And then? Kate asked, voicing the question that had been hovering between them. Yates's expression softened as he looked at her. Then we ride for Denver, like we discussed. My sister will help us get settled. After that, he hesitated. After that, it's your choice, Kate. You'll be free to do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. And if I want to stay with you, the words tumbled out before she could stop them. In answer, Yates pulled her close, his kiss more urgent than their first. When they parted, both breathless, he said, I'd like nothing better, but I need you to be sure. Your whole life, you've had choices made for you. I won't be another person who decides your path. Kate touched his face, marveling at how this man who had entered her life so suddenly had come to mean so much. I'm sure, whatever comes next, I want to face it with you. A noise outside the barn made them both freeze. Yates quickly extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness as footsteps approached. Someone's coming, he whispered. Hide behind those hay bales. Kate slipped into the shadows just as the barn door creaked open. A sliver of moonlight revealed Randall Foster standing in the doorway, a rifle in his hands. I know you're in here, Xavier, he called, his voice slurred from whiskey, but dangerous nonetheless. Saw you skulking around the house. What are you up to, boy? Yates stepped forward, placing himself between Randall and Kate's hiding place. Just checking on that new Mustang, Mr. Foster. Thought he might be spooked by the storm coming in. Randall's laugh held no humor. In the middle of the night? Take me for a fool, do you? He raised the rifle, pointing it at Yates's chest. I've been watching you. The way you look at my niece. The way you question my decisions. Think I don't know what you're planning? Kate's blood ran cold. Had her uncle discovered their plan? Did he know about the ledger? The documents? Not planning anything, sir, Yates said calmly, though Kate could see the tension in his shoulders. Just doing the job you hired me for. Liar, Randall spat. I know you're kind. Drifter with smooth words and big ideas. Think you can ride in here? Steal what's mine? His finger tightened on the trigger. Well, I've got news for you. Stop! Kate emerged from her hiding place, unable to watch Yates die for her sake. Put the gun down, Uncle Randall. Randall's bleary eyes widened at the sight of her. Catherine, what the hell are you doing out here with him? Please, she said, moving slowly towards him with her hands raised. You're drunk. You don't want to do something you'll regret. Regret? Randall laughed harshly. Only thing I regret is not seeing what was happening under my own roof, my own flesh and blood conspiring with a stranger. No one's conspiring, Kate insisted, though her trembling voice betrayed her. Mr. Xavier was just helping me with one of the horses. I couldn't sleep. Shut up, Randall roared, swinging the rifle towards her. You think I'm stupid? I know what's going on. Found my ledger moved. Saw you two whispering. Planning to run off together, ain't you? Take what's mine? The lazy R isn't just yours, Kate said, finding courage in her anger. Half of it was my father's, which makes it half mine by right. Randall's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... He lunged forward, grabbing Kate's arm with his free hand. After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By stealing from your own blood? Let her go, Yates said, his voice dangerously quiet. Now. Or what? Randall challenged, tightening his grip until Kate winced in pain. You'll shoot me? With what gun, cowboy? In one fluid motion, Yates drew the revolver Kate hadn't realized he was carrying. This one, he said, aiming it steadily at Randall. Let her go, and we can talk this through like civilized men. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with a curse, Randall shoved Kate away from him, sending her stumbling into a stack of grain sacks. He kept his rifle trained on Yates. You won't shoot me, Randall said with drunken confidence. Not in cold blood, not with witnesses. But me. He grinned maliciously. I caught a rustler in my barn. Had to defend myself and my property. Kate saw his finger begin to squeeze the trigger and acted without thinking. She grabbed a nearby pitchfork and swung it with all her strength, striking Randall's legs. He howled in pain, the rifle discharging harmlessly into the ceiling as he fell. Yates was on him in an instant, kicking the rifle away and pressing his revolver against Randall's temple. Don't move, he ordered, his voice cold with fury. Randall, winded and shocked, stared up at them with hatred. You're dead, he wheezed. Both of you. The law will hang you for this. The law might be interested in how you've been abusing your niece, Yates countered, or how you've been skimming money from a ranch that's half hers by right. Or maybe about those cattle you rustled from the Henderson place last spring. Yes, I heard about that too. Fear flickered across Randall's face for the first time. What do you want? He asked, his voice suddenly less certain. Kate stepped forward, standing tall despite her racing heart. I want what's mine, Uncle. Half the ranch, or its equivalent in cash and horses. Randall sneered. And if I refuse? Then we take these ledgers and your private correspondence to Sheriff Taylor, Yates said. I'm sure he'd be very interested in the evidence of fraud, abuse, and rustling. A tense silence followed as Randall considered his options. Finally, he let out a bitter laugh. Take the money, he said. Take whatever horses you want. But know this, Catherine. You walk out that door with him, and you're no longer my kin. You'll never be welcome back here. Never. Kate looked at the man who had made her life miserable for 5 years, who had stolen her inheritance and her freedom, and felt only relief at his words. I never felt welcome here anyway, she said quietly. Not since my parents died. With Yates keeping the gun trained on Randall, Kate quickly gathered rope from a nearby post. Together they bound Randall's hands and feet, gagging him with a bandana to prevent him from alerting the other hands. This won't hold him forever, Yates said as they finished. We need to move fast. Kate nodded, her mind already racing ahead. We should leave now, tonight. He might have told someone his suspicions already. What about your things? The documents? I have the most important ones here, Kate said, patting her pocket where she'd stashed her mother's locket and her father's pocket knife. And I memorized the details from the deed. As for clothes and such, we can buy what we need along the way. Yates studied her for a moment, something like admiration in his eyes. You're stronger than you know, Catherine Foster. Kate, she corrected him with a small smile. Just Kate now. They moved quickly after that, gathering supplies while keeping an eye on the still struggling Randall. From the barn, they took 2 of the best horses, Kate's favorite mare, Willow, and a sturdy gelding Yates had been riding since his arrival. They packed saddlebags with food from the storehouse, blankets, and Randall's hidden cash, which Kate had retrieved days earlier. As they prepared to leave, Kate paused at the barn door, looking back at her uncle. Despite everything, a small part of her felt a twinge of regret. Not for leaving, but for the relationship that could have been, should have been, between them. "Goodbye, Uncle Randall," she said softly. "I hope you find peace somehow." His only response was a muffled curse behind his gag. With a final look at the ranch house, where she'd spent so many unhappy years, Kate mounted Willow and followed Yates into the night, riding toward a future that, for the first time in her memory, held promise instead of dread. They rode hard through the night, following game trails and creek beds to obscure their tracks. By dawn, they had put nearly 20 miles between themselves and the Lazy R. But Yates insisted they couldn't stop yet. "Your uncle will get free eventually," he explained, as they paused briefly to water the horses. "And he knows these lands better than most. We need to reach the territorial line before he can organize a search party." Kate nodded, though exhaustion pulled at her. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours, and the emotional strain of the confrontation with her uncle had left her drained. But determination kept her upright in the saddle as they pushed on through the morning. By midday, they reached the foothills that marked the beginning of more rugged terrain. Here, Yates finally called for a real rest, finding a secluded hollow beside a small stream where they could catch a few hours of sleep while the horses grazed. "I'll take first watch," he said, helping Kate down from her saddle. She was so stiff she nearly collapsed when her feet touched the ground, and Yates caught her with strong hands. "I'm all right," she insisted, though she leaned into his support gratefully. "Just need a moment to find my legs again." Yates helped her to a soft patch of grass beneath a pine tree, then busied himself unloading their basic necessities from the saddlebags. Kate watched him, marveling at how quickly her life had changed. Just days ago, she had been a virtual prisoner at the Lazy R, with no hope of escape. Now she was free, riding toward a new life with a man she barely knew but trusted implicitly. "Here," Yates said, interrupting her thoughts as he handed her a strip of jerky and a canteen of water. "Eat something before you rest." Kate accepted the simple meal gratefully. As they ate in companionable silence, she studied Yates openly for the first time. In the clear light of day, away from the shadows of the ranch, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of years in the sun. The small scar near his right temple, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. "How did you really end up at the Lazy R?" she asked suddenly. "It wasn't just chance, was it?" Yates met her gaze steadily, then shook his head. "Not entirely," he admitted. "I'd heard about Randall Foster in Cheyenne, rumors about a ranch owner who was gambling away his property and mistreating his niece. Didn't know if the stories were true, but I was heading that direction anyway. Thought I'd see for myself." "So you came looking for me," Kate said softly, "to help me." "I came looking for the truth," Yates corrected gently. "Found more than I expected." His eyes held hers, and Kate felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Rest now," he said, breaking the moment. "I'll wake you in a few hours." Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion quickly pulled Kate into a deep sleep. When she awoke, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. Yates sat nearby, whittling another small figure from a piece of wood. "What is it this time?" she asked, sitting up and stretching. He smiled, holding up the half-finished carving. "A wolf, I think. Or maybe a very ambitious dog." Kate laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed freely? "How long did I sleep?" she asked, noticing the changed position of the sun. "About 4 hours," Yates replied. "We should move on soon. There's a small town about 10 miles ahead where we can resupply and maybe get news of any pursuit." As they packed up their meager camp, Kate's thoughts turned to the future. "What happens when we reach Denver?" she asked. "Will your sister really be all right with strangers arriving on her doorstep?" "Abigail has a big heart and a bigger house," Yates assured her. "Her husband's a successful businessman, and they have plenty of room. But more importantly," he added, meeting her eyes, "she understands what it means to start over. She'll welcome you." "And you," Kate pressed, "will you stay in Denver too?" Yates's hand stilled in the act of tightening his saddle cinch. "I'd like to," he said carefully, "if that's what you want." Kate moved closer, courage born of their shared ordeal making her bold. "What if what I want is for us to find our own place? Somewhere we could build something together. A ranch, maybe. Not as big as the Lazy R, but ours." Yates turned to face her fully, hope evident in his expression. "Is that what you want, Kate? A life with me?" "I know it's fast," she acknowledged, her cheeks warming. "We've known each other less than a month. But in that time, you've shown me more kindness, more respect than anyone has in years. You risked your life to help me, and I—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Xavier Yates." For a moment, Yates was still, and Kate feared she had misread the situation entirely. Then he closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I knew from the moment I saw you standing up to your uncle, tired and afraid but still defiant, that you were someone special," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't plan on falling in love, but here we are." His confession sent a thrill through Kate. On impulse, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. This kiss was different from their others. Not desperate or urgent, but a promise, an affirmation of feelings too new to fully understand, but too powerful to deny. When they parted, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably get to know each other properly before we start planning our ranch," he said with a smile in his voice. Kate laughed softly. "You mean you don't want to marry a woman who can't even tell you her favorite color, or whether she prefers coffee to tea?" "Blue," Yates said immediately. "Your favorite color is blue. You wear a blue ribbon in your hair on Sundays, and you drink coffee with breakfast, but prefer tea in the evening." Kate pulled back slightly, surprised. "You noticed all that?" "I notice everything about you," he said simply. The admission warmed her heart, but before she could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats made them both tense. Yates immediately moved to the edge of their small hollow, peering cautiously through the trees. "Riders," he said grimly. 3, maybe 4, coming fast from the direction of the Lazy R. Kate's stomach clenched with fear. "My uncle. Can't be. Not yet." "Maybe not," Yates replied, returning quickly to gather their belongings. "But we can't take chances. Mount up quickly." They worked in tandem, erasing signs of their camp and preparing to leave. As Kate swung into Willow's saddle, Yates handed her the reins to his gelding and drew his revolver, checking that it was fully loaded. "What are you doing?" Kate asked, alarmed. "I'll stay behind. Buy you some time," Yates said, his expression resolute. "Take both horses and head northeast toward that ridge. There's a trading post about 5 miles beyond it. Wait for me there." "No," Kate protested. "I won't leave you here to face them alone. We go together." "Kate, together," she insisted firmly. "I didn't escape one prison, just to abandon the man I love at the first sign of trouble." Yates looked as though he wanted to argue, but the approaching hoofbeats were growing louder. With a quick nod, he mounted his horse. "Stay close," he instructed. "If I say run, you run. Promise me." "I promise," Kate agreed, though she silently prayed it wouldn't come to that. They rode swiftly through the trees, angling away from the approaching riders and toward higher ground where they might have a better view of their pursuers. As they crested a small rise, Yates signaled for a halt, dismounting to peer back the way they had come. "I see them," he said after a moment. "4 riders moving fast. One of them is definitely your uncle." Kate's heart sank. He must have gotten free sooner than we expected. "And gathered the most loyal of his hands," Yates added grimly. "I recognize Simmons and Walker, don't know the 4th. "What do we do now?" Kate asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Yates considered for a moment, his eyes scanning the terrain around them. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow gap between 2 rocky outcroppings about half a mile ahead. "That pass leads to rougher country. If we can reach it before they spot us, we might lose them in the labyrinth beyond." They set off immediately, keeping to the tree line where possible to avoid being silhouetted against the sky. Kate's heart pounded in her chest, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves making her flinch in anticipation of discovery. They had almost reached the pass when a shout from behind confirmed their worst fears. "There they are!" Randall's voice carried across the distance. "Get them! Ride!" "Go!" Yates urged, spurring his gelding forward. "Don't look back!" Kate pressed her heels to Willow's sides, and the mare responded with a burst of speed. They thundered through the narrow gap and into the maze of rocks and ravines beyond, Yates leading the way with confident turns and decisions that spoke of previous familiarity with the area. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, as their pursuers were forced to slow down in the unfamiliar terrain. After several minutes of hard riding, Yates guided them into a hidden box canyon, where a small spring bubbled from the rocks. "We can catch our breath here," he said, dismounting quickly to help Kate down. "They'll have to search each branch of the trail. That should buy us some time." Kate leaned against a boulder, trying to steady her breathing. "How do you know this place so well?" she asked. "I worked as a scout for the army a few years back," Yates explained, leading the horses to the spring. "Mapped most of this region. There's a route through these canyons that can take us to the territorial line by nightfall, if we push hard." Kate nodded, grateful once again for whatever fate had brought this man into her life. As the horses drank, she and Yates discussed their next moves in hushed tones. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would continue through the maze of canyons, hopefully losing their pursuers in the process, then make a dash for the territorial line. Once across, they would be in Colorado, where Randall's influence was less certain. Just as they were preparing to leave, A rifle shot echoed through the canyon, the bullet striking the rock near Yates's head and sending stone fragments flying. "Kate!" Yates cried out in alarm as Yates grabbed her, pulling her behind cover. "Found you!" Randall's voice called from somewhere above them. "Nowhere left to run, Catherine." Yates peered carefully around the boulder, locating their attacker on a ledge about 50 yards away and considerably higher than their position. "Stay down," he whispered to Kate. "He has the high ground." "What are we going to do?" Kate asked, fear evident in her voice. Before Yates could answer, Randall called out again. "Send my niece out, Xavier, and maybe I won't put a bullet in your skull. She belongs at the Lazy R, not running off with some drifter." "I belong to meself," Kate shouted back before Yates could stop her, "and I choose to leave." Another shot rang out, this one closer. "That wasn't a request," Randall bellowed. "You've got 1 minute to show yourself, or I start shooting to kill." Yates's mind raced, assessing their options. Their horses were nervous, but still within reach. The canyon had only one entrance, which was presumably where Simmons and the others would be arriving shortly. If they could somehow distract Randall long enough to mount up. "I have an idea," Kate whispered, interrupting his thoughts. "But you need to trust me." "Always," Yates replied without hesitation. "What are you thinking?" "He wants me to show myself," Kate said. "So I will, but only enough to draw his attention. When I do, can you make that shot?" She nodded toward Randall's position. Yates considered the distance, the angle. "Not to kill," he said firmly, "but I can make him duck for cover, maybe wound him if necessary." "That's all we need," Kate assured him. "Just enough time to reach the horses and get out of here." She began to untie her bandana. "When I wave this, be ready." Yates wanted to protest, to insist on being the one to take the risk. But the determination in Kate's eyes told him this was something she needed to do. This was her standing up to her tormentor one final time. "Be careful," he said instead, positioning himself where he could aim his revolver while staying protected. Kate took a deep breath, then quickly raised the bandana above their shelter and waved it. As expected, Randall immediately fired at the movement, missing narrowly. In that split second of distraction, Yates leaned out and fired 2 quick shots at the ledge where Randall was positioned. A cry of pain told them at least one shot had found its mark. Without waiting to see more, Kate and Yates sprinted for their horses, mounting quickly and galloping toward the canyon entrance. As they rounded the final bend, they nearly collided with Simmons and Walker, who were just entering. Surprise gave Kate and Yates the advantage. Before the ranch hands could react, they had charged past, Yates firing a warning shot that sent the men's horses rearing in panic. By the time Simmons and Walker had regained control, Kate and Yates were already disappearing into the network of ravines beyond. They rode hard for hours, taking every opportunity to obscure their trail and choosing the most difficult paths through the rugged terrain. By sunset, they had reached a high ridge overlooking a vast expanse of prairie. "There," Yates said, pointing to a river glimmering in the distance. "That's the territorial boundary. Colorado's just on the other side." Kate felt a wave of emotion wash over her at the sight, relief, hope, and a bittersweet sense of finality. She was leaving behind everything she had ever known, good and bad. The Lazy R had been her home, her prison, and now her past. "We'll make camp once we cross," Yates decided, noting her exhaustion. "We've pushed the horses hard enough for one day." As they descended the ridge, The sound of distant hoofbeats made them both tense. Glancing back, Kate spotted 3 riders silhouetted against the darkening sky. "They're still coming," she said, her voice tight with fear and determination. Yates assessed the situation quickly. "They're at least a mile back, and it'll be dark soon. We can make the river before they catch up." They urged their tired horses to a final effort, racing across the open prairie toward the river that represented safety. The water was running high from recent rains, but a narrow ford provided a crossing point. As they splashed through, Kate felt a symbolic weight lifting from her shoulders. They had made it to Colorado. On the far bank, they didn't stop but continued riding for another mile before finally finding a sheltered grove of trees where they could make camp. Only then did they dismount, both of them staggering with exhaustion. "Do you think they'll follow us across the border?" Kate asked as they cared for the horses. Yates shook his head. "Doubtful. Your uncle may be determined, but he's also wounded and smart enough to know a Wyoming man with a bad reputation doesn't want to tangle with Colorado law. My guess is they'll turn back at the river." As night fell fully around them, they built a small, well-shielded fire and shared a meager dinner of jerky and hardtack. The events of the past 2 days had left them both physically and emotionally drained, but a sense of accomplishment, of victory, kept their spirits buoyed. "We did it," Kate said softly, gazing into the flames. "I'm free." Yates reached over to take her hand, his touch gentle. "You were always free, Kate. You just needed the chance to prove it to yourself." She looked up at him, this man who had changed her life so completely in such a short time. "What happens now?" Yates's smile was warm in the firelight. "Now we sleep. Tomorrow we ride for Denver. After that," he shrugged, "after that, we decide together." Kate moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "Together," she repeated, liking the sound of the word. "I think I can get used to that." As they settled down to sleep beneath the stars, Kate found herself looking forward to tomorrow for the first time in years. Whatever the future held, she would face it on her own terms, with a man who saw her strength, even when she couldn't see it herself. The journey to Denver took 5 more days, filled with new experiences for Kate, who had rarely ventured beyond the boundaries of the Lazy R in recent years. They traveled at a more leisurely pace, now that they were reasonably certain Randall wouldn't pursue them into Colorado, taking time to appreciate the changing landscape as mountains gave way to rolling foothills and eventually the outskirts of civilization. On the second day, they stopped in a small settlement to replenish their supplies. Kate was acutely aware of her disheveled appearance as they entered the general store, but the shopkeeper's wife took one look at her trail-worn clothes and exhausted face, and immediately offered her a chance to wash up in their back room. "You look like you've had quite a journey, dear," the woman said kindly, providing Kate with a basin of warm water and a clean towel. "You could say that," Kate replied with a grateful smile. "We're heading to Denver." "Newly married?" the woman asked, noticing the way Yates hovered protectively nearby. The question caught Kate off guard. She and Yates hadn't discussed their relationship in such formal terms, though they'd certainly acknowledged their feelings for each other. Before she could formulate a response, Yates stepped in smoothly. "Not yet, ma'am," he said with a respectful tip of his hat. "But with her permission, I hope to remedy that situation soon." The shopkeeper's wife beamed approvingly, while Kate felt a blush warming her cheeks. She caught Yates's eye, and the question in his gaze was clear. She gave him a small nod, her heart fluttering at the smile that spread across his face in response. Later that day, as they rode side by side through a meadow bright with wildflowers, Yates brought his horse alongside hers. "I hope I didn't speak out of turn back there," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "About marriage, I mean." Kate smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. "You didn't," she assured him, "though I believe, traditionally, there's supposed to be an actual question involved." Yates chuckled, then surprised her by bringing his horse to a halt and dismounting. Kate stopped as well, watching curiously as he approached her. With formal grace that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance, he took her hand and dropped to one knee in the grass. "Catherine Foster," he said, his green eyes serious as they held hers. "I know we haven't known each other long by most standards, but I believe some things in life don't require years to recognize. I love your strength, your kindness, and your courage. I want to build a life with you, not because you need my protection, but because I need your partnership. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Kate's vision as emotion welled up inside her. This was not the life she had imagined for herself, but somehow it felt more right than anything had before. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Xavier Yates, I will marry you." He rose to his feet, lifting her from the saddle and into his arms in one fluid motion. Their kiss was tender and full of promise, sealed with the sun warming their faces and the scent of wildflowers all around them. "I don't have a ring," Yates admitted when they parted, "but my sister has my mother's wedding band. If you like it, it would honor me for you to wear it." "I'd be proud to," Kate assured him, overcome by the thought of being welcomed into his family in such a meaningful way. They continued their journey with renewed purpose, spending the evenings planning their future together. Yates spoke of the cattle ranch he'd always dreamed of owning, while Kate shared her mother's recipes and her own hopes for a home filled with love and laughter, perhaps even children someday. On the evening of the 5th day, they crested a hill and saw Denver spread out below them, its buildings catching the golden light of sunset. Kate reined in her horse, suddenly overcome by the enormity of what lay ahead. This bustling city would be her home, at least temporarily, and the thought was both exciting and terrifying. "Having second thoughts?" Yates asked gently, noticing her hesitation. Kate shook her head. "Just overwhelmed. It's so much bigger than I imagined." "We don't have to stay in the city if you don't want to," Yates assured her. "Plenty of good land outside town. But Abigail will be eager to meet you, and her husband has connections that could help us get established." With a deep breath, Kate nodded. "I'm ready." They rode into Denver as dusk was falling, making their way through streets crowded with wagons, carriages, and pedestrians. Kate marveled at the gas lamps being lit along the main thoroughfares, the brick buildings rising 2 and 3 stories high, and the general bustle of city life that was so different from the quiet isolation of the lazy R. Yates guided them confidently through the maze of streets until they reached a handsome 2-story house in what appeared to be a prosperous neighborhood. A wrought iron fence surrounded a neat garden, and warm lights spilled from the windows, making the place look especially inviting after days on the trail. As they dismounted and tied their horses to the hitching post, the front door opened and a slender woman with Yates's same green eyes hurried down the path. "Yates!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. Why didn't you send word you were coming?" "It was a rather sudden decision, Abby," Yates replied, returning her embrace before turning to Kate. "I'd like you to meet Catherine Foster. Kate, this is my sister, Abigail Thornton." Abigail's gaze was warm and welcoming as she took Kate's hands in hers. "So you're the young woman my brother wrote about in his letters," she said with a smile. "I'm delighted to meet you, Catherine." "Just Kate, please," Kate replied, relieved by the genuine kindness in Abigail's manner. "And I'm very grateful for your hospitality, Mrs. Thornton." "Abigail, or Abby," the woman insisted. "We're to be family, after all, if I know my brother." She cast a knowing glance at Yates, who looked slightly embarrassed. "News travels fast," he muttered. Abigail laughed. "You mentioned her in every letter for weeks. It wasn't hard to guess where things were heading." She linked her arm through Kate's. "Come inside, both of you. You look exhausted, and dinner is nearly ready. William will be home shortly." The interior of the Thornton home was everything Kate had imagined from Yates's descriptions. Comfortable, elegant, without being ostentatious, and above all, welcoming. After weeks at the Lazy R and days on the trail, the simple comforts of a well-appointed parlor, a hot bath, and clean clothes loaned by Abigail felt like unimaginable luxuries. By the time William Thornton arrived home, Kate was feeling more like herself, dressed in a simple but pretty blue dress that Abigail had altered to fit her. William proved to be as kind as his wife, greeting Kate warmly and expressing genuine interest in her and Yates's plans. Over dinner, Kate found herself sharing the story of their escape from the Lazy R, including her uncle's abuse and theft. She was surprised by how easily the words came, and how the telling seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. "Well," William said when she had finished, "it sounds to me like you've both been through quite an ordeal. But you should know, Kate, that you're safe here. Randall Foster has no jurisdiction or influence in Denver. And we have plenty of room for you to stay as long as you need," Abigail added warmly, "until you decide what comes next." "That's very generous," Kate said, overwhelmed by their kindness. "But we wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Abigail insisted. "It's the least we can do. Besides," she added with a smile, "I've been wanting to help plan a wedding for ages, and William has robbed me of the chance by refusing to give me any nieces or nephews so far." William chuckled. "I believe that particular failure lies with both of us, my dear." The easy affection between Abigail and William touched Kate deeply. This was what a marriage should be: partnership, respect, and genuine fondness. It was what she hoped to build with Yates. Later that evening, as they sat in the parlor over coffee, William raised a subject that had been on Kate's mind since their arrival. "I understand you have legal documents proving your partial ownership of the Lazy R," he said. "If you're interested, I have colleagues who specialize in property law. They might be able to help you secure your rightful inheritance, even from a distance." Kate exchanged a glance with Yates. "I hadn't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Part of me just wants to leave it all behind and start fresh." "Understandable," William nodded. "But if half that ranch is legally yours, that represents a significant asset that could help you establish yourselves elsewhere." "He's right, Kate," Yates said gently. "I don't want you to give up what's rightfully yours out of fear, or a desire to forget. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, but it should be a decision made with all the facts." Kate considered this. The thought of engaging in a legal battle with her uncle was daunting, but the idea of reclaiming what her parents had meant for her to have held a certain appeal. "Perhaps I could at least speak with your colleagues," she said finally. "Get their opinion on the matter." William smiled approvingly. "I'll arrange it for later this week." As the evening wound down, Abigail showed Kate to a comfortable guest room, while Yates was given a room across the hall. The separation felt strange after days of sleeping side by side under the stars, but Kate understood the propriety of the arrangement. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," Abigail said, placing a stack of fresh towels on a chair. "If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." "You've already been so kind," Kate replied. "I don't know how to thank you." Abigail's expression softened. "My brother has always been the protector in our family. When my first husband turned violent, Yates was the one who helped me escape, who made sure I was safe until I could stand on my own again. Now he's found someone who matches his strength and courage. That's all the thanks I need." After Abigail left, Kate sat on the edge of the bed, fingering the soft cotton of the nightgown she'd been provided. The events of the past weeks played through her mind, like scenes from a dime novel: the confrontation with her uncle, the midnight escape, the proposal in the meadow. It hardly seemed real. A soft knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Yates standing there, looking as out of place in the civilized surroundings as she felt. "Just wanted to make sure you were settling in all right," he said, his voice low, to avoid disturbing the household. Kate smiled, warmth spreading through her at the sight of him. "It's strange," she admitted. "Having walls around me again, a real bed? Too strange?" "Too strange?" Yates asked, concern creasing his brow. Kate shook her head. "No, just different. I'll adjust." She paused, then added softly, "Though I may have gotten used to having you nearby." Yates's expression softened. "Just a few more weeks," he promised. "Then you'll never have to sleep without me again, if you don't want to." The simple promise filled Kate with a quiet joy. "I should let you get some rest," she said reluctantly. "It's been a long journey." Yates nodded, but before turning to go, he leaned in to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Sleep well, Kate. Dream of our future." As she closed the door and prepared for bed, Kate found herself doing exactly that, dreaming of a future that for the first time in years held genuine promise and hope. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity and new experiences. True to his word, William arranged for Kate to meet with a respected lawyer who specialized in property disputes. After reviewing the documents Kate had brought from the Lazy R, the lawyer confirmed that she had a strong claim to half the ranch and its assets. "With these papers and witnesses to your uncle's behavior, we could potentially secure not only your share of the property, but also damages for the funds he misappropriated," the lawyer explained. "However, it would require you to return to Wyoming at some point for court proceedings." The thought of facing her uncle again made Kate uneasy, but Yates squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You won't be alone," he promised, "and we don't have to decide immediately." In the end, Kate chose to initiate the legal proceedings, but postponed any return to Wyoming until after her wedding. "I want to start our life together first," she told Yates. "The ranch can wait." Meanwhile, with Abigail's enthusiastic assistance, preparations for a small but proper wedding began to take shape. The ceremony would be held in the garden of the Thornton home, with a local minister officiating and a small gathering of the Thorntons' friends in attendance. Kate, who had expected to be married in a simple ceremony at the courthouse, found herself caught up in Abigail's excitement. Together they selected fabric for a wedding dress, which Abigail insisted on having made by the finest dressmaker in Denver. "It's not every day my only brother gets married," she declared, when Kate protested the expense. "Besides, William and I want to give you both a proper start." The generosity of the Thorntons extended beyond wedding preparations. William, who had investments in several businesses around Denver, introduced Yates to local ranchers and cattle buyers, helping him establish connections that would be valuable when they started their own ranch. One evening, about 2 weeks after their arrival, William returned home with news that would shape their future. "I've heard of a property that might interest you," he told Yates and Kate over dinner. "A small ranch about 20 miles east of the city. The owner is an elderly gentleman looking to retire to San Francisco, where his daughter lives. Nearly 1,000 acres, good water rights, and a solid, if modest, house." Kate's heart quickened at the description. "It sounds perfect," she said, looking to Yates for his reaction. His eyes reflected her excitement. "Could we see it?" "I've arranged for us to ride out there the day after tomorrow," William confirmed. "If you like it, I believe the terms would be quite reasonable." 2 days later, they rode in William's carriage to view the property. As they crested a gentle rise and the ranch came into view, Kate knew immediately that this was meant to be their home. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built of local stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Several well-maintained outbuildings clustered nearby: a barn, a bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a workshop. Beyond stretched acres of good grazing land, dotted with stands of cottonwood trees and bisected by a clear running creek. The owner, Mr. Hargrove, was a weathered but spry man in his 70s who greeted them warmly and took obvious pride in showing them around the property he'd built over 4 decades. "Started with just the house and 50 acres, he explained as they walked the grounds. "Added land as I could afford it. Raised 3 children here with my wife before she passed on. Now it's too much for one old man, and my daughter's been after me to move to California." As they toured the house, Kate could envision their life here. Breakfasts in the sunny kitchen, evenings on the porch watching the sunset, perhaps someday children playing in the yard. The rooms were spacious and well built, if in need of a woman's touch after years of bachelor living. "What do you think?" Yates asked quietly when they had a moment alone in what would be their bedroom, a large corner room with windows facing east and south. Kate took his hands in hers, unable to contain her smile. "I think it feels like home already." The decision was made. With William's help negotiating the terms, they arranged to purchase the ranch, which Mr. Hargrove had named Cottonwood Creek for the trees lining the water. The sale would be finalized the week after their wedding, giving Mr. Hargrove time to pack his belongings and say goodbye to the place he'd loved for so long. "You'll take good care of it," he told Kate and Yates with their final handshake. "I can see that, and that's worth more to me than any amount of money." The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect blue sky that seemed to promise good fortune. Kate stood in Abigail's guest room, where she had spent the last 3 weeks, and marveled at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The wedding dress was simpler than the fashionable gowns favored by Denver society, but more elegant than anything Kate had ever worn. Made of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It accentuated her slender figure, while the color brought out the warmth in her auburn hair, which Abigail had arranged in soft curls crowned with a wreath of fresh wildflowers. "You look beautiful," Abigail said, adjusting the flowers one last time. "My brother won't know what hit him?" Kate smiled nervously. "I hardly recognize myself." "This is the real you," Abigail assured her. "The woman who was always there beneath the circumstances, strong, beautiful, and about to begin the life you deserve." A knock at the door announced William, who would be escorting Kate down the garden path to where Yates and the minister waited. "It's time," he said, offering his arm with a warm smile. "Your groom is looking rather anxious to see you." The garden was transformed. Paper lanterns hung from tree branches. White ribbons adorned the chairs where a dozen guests sat, and a simple arch, covered in climbing roses, marked the spot where the ceremony would take place. But Kate saw none of it clearly, for her eyes were fixed on Yates, waiting for her beneath the arch. He looked different in his new suit, taller somehow, more distinguished, but his eyes were the same, filled with love and wonder as she approached on William's arm. When she reached him and their hands joined, Kate felt a sense of rightness that transcended words. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to cherish and support each other through whatever life brought their way. When Yates placed his mother's wedding band on Kate's finger, a simple gold band worn smooth by years of love, she felt the weight of not just the ring, but the family legacy it represented. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "Mr. Yates, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was tender and full of promise, sealing a journey that had begun with a moment of courage and intervention on a ranch porch what seemed like a lifetime ago. The celebration that followed was joyful but intimate. The Thorntons had arranged for a feast to be served in their dining room, followed by dancing in the parlor, where the furniture had been moved aside to create space. Kate, who had never attended a proper social gathering before, found herself swept up in the merriment, dancing not only with her new husband, but also with William and several of their guests. As the evening drew to a close, and the guests departed with well wishes for the newlyweds, who would spend their wedding night at the Thornton home before leaving the following day to take possession of their new ranch, Kate and Yates found themselves alone at last in the bedroom that had been prepared for them. Abigail's idea of a proper wedding night, requiring more than the simple guest room. Despite the intimacy they had already shared on their journey to Denver, they found themselves suddenly shy with each other. "Wife," Yates said softly, testing the word as he took her hands in his. "My wife." Kate smiled, her heart full. "Husband," she replied, equally moved by the simple term that now bound them together. "Are you happy, Kate?" he asked, searching her face. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she assured him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "When you stopped my uncle that day, I never imagined where it would lead." Yates turned, his head to kiss her palm. "I think part of me knew, even then," he admitted. "Something about you called to me in a way I can't explain." "Not again," Kate quoted softly, remembering his words that first day. "That's what you said when you caught his arm." Yates nodded, his expression growing serious. "I couldn't bear the thought of him hurting you. Not then, not ever again." "You saved me," Kate said. "No," Yates corrected gently. "You saved yourself." I just helped clear the path." Kate considered this, recognizing the truth in his words. Her decision to leave, to fight for her freedom and her future, had been her own. Yates had been her ally, her partner in the journey, but the courage had come from within. "Then we saved each other," she decided, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "And will continue to do so every day." As they embraced, the past, with all its pain, seemed to fall away, leaving only the present moment and the promise of their future together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them, as they had faced their escape from the Lazy R, with courage, determination, and unwavering faith in each other. The following morning, Kate and Yates bid farewell to the Thorntons, promising to visit often, and insisting that William and Abigail must be their first guests once they were settled at Cottonwood Creek Ranch. "This isn't goodbye," Abigail assured Kate as they embraced. "It's just the beginning of a new chapter. Your family now." With their belongings packed in a wagon, purchased with part of the money they had brought from Wyoming, and riding the same horses that had carried them to freedom, the newlyweds set out for their new home. As they approached Cottonwood Creek in the golden light of late afternoon, Kate felt a surge of emotion. This land, these buildings, this life, it was theirs to shape together. Yates reined his horse to a stop at the top of the rise, overlooking the property. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, his voice thick with feeling. Kate reached across the space between them to take his hand. "Home?" she repeated, savoring the word. "I like the sound of that." Together, they rode down to begin their new life, leaving behind the shadows of the past and moving toward a future bright with possibility. 5 years later, Kate stood on the porch of their home at Cottonwood Creek Ranch, watching as Yates taught their 3-year-old son, James, to ride his pony in the yard. The boy's delighted laughter carried on the breeze, mingling with the gentle gurgling of baby Elizabeth in the cradle beside her. The ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. With hard work and Yates's knowledge of cattle, they had built a respected operation that now employed 6 hands year-round and more during roundup season. The house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, and Kate's garden produced vegetables and flowers in abundance. The legal battle for Kate's share of the Lazy R had been resolved 2 years earlier. When facing mounting evidence and the prospect of public humiliation, Randall Foster had finally agreed to a settlement. The money had allowed them to expand their holdings. But more importantly, for Kate, it had represented a final closing of that chapter of her life. She had heard that her uncle still ran the Lazy R, though rumors suggested the ranch was struggling under his mismanagement. She felt no satisfaction in this news, only a quiet sadness for what might have been if he had chosen a different path. Yates dismounted and lifted James from his pony, swinging the boy into the air before setting him on his shoulders. Together they approached the porch, both wearing identical grins of accomplishment. "Mama, did you see?" James called excitedly. "I rode all by myself." "I saw, sweetheart," Kate assured him, smiling at her son's pride. "You're becoming quite the horseman." Yates sat James down and stepped up onto the porch, placing a kiss first on baby Elizabeth's forehead and then on Kate's lips. "He takes after his mother," he said with a wink. "Natural talent." Kate leaned into her husband's embrace, watching as James carefully patted his baby sister's hand. The scene before her was everything she had once thought beyond her reach. A loving husband, beautiful children, a home filled with warmth and security. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Yates asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Kate smiled up at him, the man who had caught her uncle's arm that fateful day and changed the course of her life forever. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she said softly. "How lucky we are." "Luck had very little to do with it," Yates replied, his arm tightening around her waist. "This life we've built, it's the result of courage, determination, and love. Mostly yours." Kate shook her head, unwilling to take such credit. "Ours," she corrected. "Everything good in my life began the moment you said, 'Not again.'" As the sun set over Cottonwood Creek Ranch, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, much like the day they first met, Kate Xavier knew with absolute certainty that those two simple words had been the beginning of the greatest journey of her life. A journey of liberation, love, and the creation of the home and family she had always deserved.